Hey everybody, my name's Arnaldo Woffman, here with Gear It First. I'm here with John Young of the Disc Jockey News and our super cool, awesome high five special guest. Mike, introduce yourself to everybody.
Hey guys, what's up, everybody? Thanks for having me, Arnaldo. John, Mike Doucot here from Electro-Voice. I'm the North American marketing manager for EV portable sound. So all the banging stuff, man. Woo!
Absolutely. Every year when we feel the room tremble and shake, that's usually me having Taco Bell. But when you hear the heavy bass, that's EV.
That's us, baby. We can help you along every now and then.
And you know what? I gotta tell you this, as somebody that has worked with other companies and other booths, we really appreciate the fact that Electro Voice is the only company that creates its own private listening area where you're not bashing everybody out because your speakers are loud. I mean, there's no joke about it. Those ETXs are no joke. I actually just played the video reviews on them, guys. There's also a comparison that I've done against other subs, and I just used the ETXs for beauty pageant because it's interesting. This show, they have a party ahead of time, so they want it to feel like a nightclub. But even during the pageant itself, they want upbeat music, they want heavy bass, but they don't want it to be so distorted, like some of the other brands will deliver. They want it to be clean, but they still wanted to shake the walls. And, we only used two of the 18 SPs, and I thought I was just going to keep it on cardioid mode just to, kind of keep the sound off the stage. But we decided to run them both, and after about 4 or 5 of the hotel lamps fell off the ceiling, like, yeah, we're gonna back down on the bass a little bit. It was
It's probably a good signal.
so. Today's show, I mean, I've been really excited about it because for those of you guys that don't know, I mean, obviously Evie and Mike, I mean, they know everything that there is when it comes to getting great sound out of your rig. Uh, One of the things that I love about the ETX, the EKX, and even the ZLX is you do have that DSP. That DSP is so powerful that for me, I don't have to even worry about bringing my drive rack anymore because it has that delay built in. It does have, room EQ in there. It's got a whole bunch of great stuff in there. Um, in a nutshell, Mike, how would you describe what EV tries to bring out for the live sound and DJ sound industry?
Well, I mean, if we step back 15, 20 years, I've been with EV for about 13 years, but it's important, I think, for people to know that I was a mobile DJ myself.
Mm-hmm.
I did nightclubs, I did weddings and bar mitzvahs and all that stuff. I was operations manager for a DJ company here in Minneapolis, and really that's where I got in the industry. So when I started at EV, I really noticed that their focus was very much on musicians, and musicians to this day are still a big market for us, very important to us. It really drives a lot of the passion, and it drives the entire music industry, from the beginning. But the truth of the matter is things have changed in the last 13 years. Obviously, kids are not picking up instruments as often as they were. They're in front of computers. They're more inclined to become a DJ these days than they are a musician. Number one. Number two, the cold hard reality is musicians don't spend a lot of money on loudspeakers. They spend their money on guitars and drums and keyboards
Yeah.
and whatnot. Where DJs, on the other hand, are often doing multiple kinds of events. You might need a ceremony system, you might need a wedding system, you might need a prom system, you might be doing outdoor events. You're oftentimes bordering on every shape and size, some all the way up to full-blown production companies, flying line arrays and things like that. So the opportunity for us to sell to the DJ market was identified by myself, and I said, look, I mean, we're missing a big part of our by part of our market by kind of ignoring them. And there's always been this odd kind of shall I say, animosity between DJs and musicians, right? Wedding bands used to get all the gigs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they paid their bills. And now, DJs have provided in many ways a better service, and you're not splitting that money 5 to 10 ways with a big band. It's usually one or two guys that are coming out and doing your average wedding. So there's a lot more revenue that they have, a lot more spending money, things like that. And musicians are still super important to us. But I think specific with loudspeakers, we've definitely identified that we, you know, that's a very important market for us. So we've started really developing products with them in mind, and a lot of that has been, taking shape with just ergonomics and portability. I think you're seeing that more and more. Obviously, I think DJs were largely behind the push for powered loudspeakers here in the U.S. Powered loudspeakers are probably sold, as far as a revenue ratio, probably 80-20. Um,
Yeah.
80% of the revenue from loudspeakers being sold now in the U.S. is from powered boxes versus passive systems, and that's drastically different from 10 years ago. And I think that was largely driven from the needs of DJs with a quick in and out, very simple to set up, very simple to use. So in many ways that's really pushed us, and we've really no longer, we still design our products to meet multiple needs and different types of applications. But DJ is very strongly right at the top of our list now, in considering what a product needs to have.
Well, and I've noticed that you guys have been, pretty much trendsetters. You guys have always boasted that your stuff is engineered and designed and made in the U.S. And now you're seeing other speaker companies kind of take that shift. But even when the thing that caught my attention, like for example with the ETX series, was their cardioid mode. And by the end of the show, we'll do the FAQ. There's already tons of questions coming in about that.
Yeah.
I never even heard that term being used, especially with powered speakers, until you guys had it out. Now it seems everybody and their grandmother is
Yeah.
trying to copy that as well. So you guys have always been really ahead of the curve on that. So that being said, obviously today's show, we want to talk about getting the most out of your rig. I have done personally multiple videos, explaining to DJs that wattage doesn't really matter when it comes to getting good sound. You can get good sound out of a less powerful system because you don't need 3,000 continuous watts pumping through your bass for a 100-person wedding.
Right.
So that's one thing I wanted to touch about, especially with your expertise and knowledge, is let's say for example 4 tips on how to get better sound, whether it's positioning of the speakers, understanding maybe something about what comb filtering is, and even sub positioning as well, because it seems every DJ likes to argue about that, but ultimately you can't beat physics.
Right, absolutely. I think at a basic level, I mean, we can talk through some things tonight. I mean, the first thing I would encourage everybody to do is actually invest the time in learning audio.
Mm-hmm.
I see an awful lot of interest with DJs paying attention to lighting and learning DMX and learning, that side of the industry. And I think that's because it's a visual wow, and it's something they can sell to their clients very easily. Where audio is almost forgotten in some ways, because as long as it's good enough, a lot of people don't really pay too much attention. But I think what they're leaving on the table sometimes is the ability to really be that much better. And in some ways, you're not selling them the wow factor. You're able to deliver a service that should be required. It should be the minimum amount that you're giving them. You can hold a party or a dance or whatever this is without lighting. You can't do it without audio. And so learning the tips and tricks to make it sound good, to avoid feedback, for instance, and things like this. If you don't take the time to do it and you have feedback at the event, will you get through to the event? Yeah, sure. But your client should never have to experience that. So while they'll never complain unless it happens, being able to prevent that, I think, is just kind of step one. So that's where I would always start, is encourage people to really learn what it is. And believe me, I'm no rocket scientist. I am surrounded by people that are far smarter than me, but I know enough to avoid major problems, to be able to do good audio, and I know when it's bad, and I know I know what I don't know, and I know who to go to ask when I
Mm-hmm.
run into problems. So I think that's an important part.
Absolutely. So I guess we'll start. Let's talk about speaker placement. Most DJs, they either bring one or two subs, and then they have the two tops. Some of them put the tops directly into the subs, into the subs to make them symmetrical. Some of them, put their subs dead center. You know, and obviously the answer is it depends on the room. That's the
Sure.
universal answer. But I mean, ultimately, if you walk in and you see your standard wedding hall and you see the DJ setting up, what would you say is the ideal setup to be able to get the best sound out of the room? How far should the speakers be apart? Because it seems the industry standard is 60 by 90. Some
You're
are
right.
a little bit different, but 60 by 90 seems to be the standard. And those of you guys that know what we're talking about the degree of how the sound comes out. So, what would you say would be the ideal placement of speakers for that?
Well, the coverage pattern is always going to vary. First thing we'll assume is you're going to want to achieve stereo sound.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so if we assume that, then what you want to make sure is that 90-degree horizontal coverage that your loudspeaker has is placed in a way where all the people are, they're going to be able to hear both the left channel and the right channel, both speakers. So that being said, the mistake I see pretty frequently is DJs either putting them right next to their facade or whatever, right in the middle of the dance floor or one end of the room, and they're usually faced straight out, which is usually not right. Only because you're going to want to consider where people are going to be. Let's assume in a typical wedding scenario, the DJ's on one end of the room on a wall, right in the middle of the room, and maybe a 20-foot dance floor, and they've got the speakers on the two corners. If they've got those speakers pointed straight out, what you could imagine is say the right channel's coming in kind of like this,
Mm-hmm.
and the left channel's coming in like this. Well, you've left this big pie shape here in the middle, where most people are going to be dancing, and they're dancing in a hole, basically. So a better solution would actually be, instead of putting those speakers out on the far corners of the dance floor, move them in a little bit closer, and then splay them out a little bit. In a perfect world, what you want to do is achieve, uh, you know, even coverage from left to right, so everybody's kind of hearing the same experience, and that's really just kind of playing around with the angles. A good way to test that too, like you said, there's no real one size fits all answer, but a good way to test that would be just get yourself some pink noise instead of just playing, whatever demo tracks you like to do a quick sound check and make sure everything sounds good. Use pink noise, play that through your system, and then walk through the room. That'll give you the ability to really hear where the sound is overlapping and when there's holes, because you'll hear the change in the audio. It almost sounds like a swooshing sound
Mm-hmm.
as you walk from left to right. You'll hear a and what you want to hear is it nice and even. So you can play around with that and just experiment a little bit. But that's generally the best advice I could give you is take the time to think about where you're pointing the speaker, and know the coverage of those boxes.
So would the
Mike, you meant
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
hang on, Arnaldo. Mike, you mentioned splaying the speakers out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just want to make sure that so they're turning away from each other. That's what I want to make sure to clarify.
And again, it kind of depends on placement. It's a little tough for me to explain, but if we've got, let's say, the dance floor like this, and they're pointed in, again, you've got that pie shape. But if I bring them closer together like this and point them out a little bit, that 90-degree coverage, if this is the center mark, and on both sides, then that's exactly where you're going to hear the left and right channels. So, there's points in where the audio will intersect, and that's never ideal, but you're going to have some of that no matter what. There is no perfect scenario. But again, it really depends on the width of the room. It depends on where the people are going to be. For cocktail music and speeches, things like that, you may want to consider, splaying them out, because that's mono content at that point, right? everybody only needs to hear one speech or something like that,
Yeah.
right? So you can achieve very even coverage without it overlapping by splaying them out a little bit and keeping that 90-degree mark. You know, one's going from here 90 degrees and the other's going from here to 90 degrees that way. So now you've got nice and even coverage. Now, if the goal is to have stereo content, well, now these people over here won't hear it because remember it was cut off and it's
Right.
pointing this way. So now it's maybe, you know, during the reception or early on in the evening, they're pointed out a little bit. Maybe in the evening, now we bring it back in because people are going to be dancing here. And that'll cause different, you know, everything with audio, that's a series of trade-offs. You may want to just point them back in to get that coverage mainly focused on the dance floor. And I would say at that point, it's more important to have that than when those coverage patterns are overlapping. You will have some phase cancellation and you will cause some audio problems, but you know, it's the lesser of two evils at that point. Do I want everybody to really get that impact and that stereo effect on my dance floor, or do I want to achieve nice even coverage across the whole room? Well, later on in the night, I probably want to just be banging them. It's like the whole dance floor is wearing a gigantic set of headphones, you know, and you're just banging on them from both sides, and that you know, it really depends on what your goals are there.
Absolutely. And real quick, the comment section suddenly blew up about that. Jeff was asking why splaying out, but you know pretty much explained that is that if you have a 90-degree angle and if the 90 degrees coming directly from the speakers, a lot of DJs don't realize that, yeah, you're creating that kind of pie shape. And if the speakers are too close, it's almost like a W shape, and you're going to get some of that cancellation or comb filtering. So by splaying them out, you're pretty much going like this, as much as 90 degrees as my fingers can get. So I guess that makes sense. And that's one of the reasons why I've always run mono, not stereo.
Right.
Somebody mentioned, Danger Close says you can run into phasing issues, but if you're running stereo, then it should have been handled long before the track was released. I would have to disagree with that because most people are mastering them if, you know, for the, you know, a tight angle, not for 60 by 90 type speakers, correct?
Well, I think what he may be referring to is phasing, you know, a different type of phasing as an effect. I mean, naturally, when you have two similar frequencies, and you're right, it does depend on how that thing is mastered. But there's very little content. Although we listen to stereo music typically, most of that content is essentially mono. The kick drum, for instance, or the hi-hat, that's in both channels. It's pretty rare that in a track that everything is panned one direction or the other. I think what you'll hear is, you know, when you do hear stereo content, it almost throws you for a loop. We all know the intro to Shook Me All Night Long, for instance, is panned hard left, right? And then when everything else kicks in, you know, then we get that stereo effect a little bit. But the truth is, most of that content is really mono. So, you know, there's anytime you have the same basically the same content being reproduced by multiple sources, and those sources are overlapping in their coverage, there will be some phasing. Now, that's going to, you know, depending on placement, and there's all kinds of different things, but depending on frequency, you know, there's all kinds of different ways that you'll hear that, and sometimes you won't. Honestly, sometimes the wavelengths are so short that it really doesn't matter much. But you know, it kind of depends. But play around with it, and that's where you kind of experience it. You know, getting back to that previous point you had, Arnoldo, about splaying them out. Again, I'm assuming a perfect world where those speakers are right next to each other. The real world is they're probably at least 5-10 feet apart. So now I've created basically an alleyway of no coverage instead of a pie shape. So again, it's balanced. Now maybe I want to splay them out just a little bit, right? So there's a little bit of overlap, but I still have pretty good even coverage. So the truth is always somewhere in between. But if you understand it, then you know when you hear something you don't like, you know how to fix it. So that's the important part.
No, absolutely. Let's go back to the pink noise. I mean, I have pink noise from my car audio days. Where would a DJ go and download pink noise?
You know, I'm pretty sure there's plenty of apps out there. I use an app called Audio Tools. I think it's like $20 on the iTunes store or whatever. It's got all kinds of cool tone generators, sine wave generators, pink noise generators, measurement tools, things like that. It's money well spent for the $20 or whatever it is. And so you can do that. I'm sure there's other, if you don't want to get super scientific with it, I'm pretty sure you can even just I would guess there's even a YouTube track somewhere with pink noise that you could play that isn't it's probably not perfect, but it's probably good enough for a quick, hey, what's going on out here in the room,
Oh, absolutely. So then let's talk about bass, because bass is obviously very different than the way normal speakers work. And DJs, for this who don't know, bass for the most part is omnidirectional. So the placement of sub matters and doesn't matter all at the same time. Um, and it seems that everybody puts their subs differently. I'm a big fan of, if I'm in a solid wall, I couple them against a solid wall. That's what we did with this hotel room. It's just complete solid concrete. We put the ETXs, we stack one on top of the other, put them about 2 feet from the wall, cornered, loaded them. You'd swear there was at least 10 subs in that room. It was ridiculous. There was a point that we couldn't hear anything but bass, which is great. But that being said, some DJs like the symmetry of keeping, and myself included, with my smaller wedding systems, I put my speaker directly on top of my sub with the pole. What are the pros and cons of each one? I mean, do you lose bass because you're having your subs only, let's say, 8 feet apart? Again, obviously, I know the answer is it depends, but what's the general rule when it comes to sub positioning?
Well, the general rule is if you can keep them together within a half of wavelength, okay? So subs as a general rule are producing low end somewhere between 40 hertz and 100 hertz. That's where most low end subwoofer musical content is going to live, between 40 and 100 hertz. Those wavelengths are anywhere from between, let's say, 25, 30 feet up to roughly at 100 hertz, probably 7 or 8 feet, something like that, I think. But the point is if those subs are within a half wavelength, so if you can keep them within, if we assume on the low side at 40 hertz, those wavelengths are, say, 25 feet. If we can keep those subs within, 10 to 12 feet of each other, you will get some coupling. I'll take a step back and say, depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to absolutely crush people with low end, then you're going to probably want to go for, what you were describing there, Arnaldo, is trying to get that free coupling and using the room as a boundary to basically, use directivity then, and your subs become more efficient. And you're getting more output that way. If you have some really good subs that can keep up with the rest of your system, then you have the luxury of putting them somewhere else in the room and not having to get that free, free coupling effect where you're getting, getting those subs working with each other. So I would start there. What is your goal? Do you want to make your subs louder, or do you want to get nice even coverage? And honestly, there's a third factor in there, is aesthetics. Frankly, in a perfect world, coupling the subs right next to each other in the center of where everybody's going to be is perfect. But rarely do we have that luxury. So a lot of times, again, in the typical, say, wedding scenario, the subs are split again, sometimes 20 feet apart, sometimes more, right? At that point, you're not really getting any good acoustical coupling happening, and that's okay if you don't need it. But also what you will then have happen is you'll be getting, really some again, phase cancellation, and that's where it can be really noticeable with your subwoofers, where you're standing in one area and it is just crushing you. There's a power alley right down the middle of the dance floor, and you literally take a step to the left, maybe 3 feet, and it's nothing. It's like there's literally nothing happening. You, especially with subwoofers, it can do some amazing crazy things out there that really can freak you out. But as far as placement goes, I hate to pull the Ben Stowe card, but it really does depend on what your goal is.
No, absolutely. And I think we should go ahead because somebody brought it up earlier, and it's always been a conversation. You get a lot of DJs that say, "Well, I want deep bass, but I can only fit 12s and in my car or whatever." And I don't think they, in their trunk or whatever. And I've been pushing. Bigger doesn't necessarily mean always deeper. It depends on the brand, depends on many things. I mean, obviously, yeah, you're going to get much deeper sound for the most part out of an 18 than you would a 12. But, oh my goodness, and I'm horrible with model names, Mike, but your 12-inch,
okay.
the little portable sub that you guys have.
ZXA1 sub.
Yeah, those things kick.
Yeah.
They kick loud. So, I mean, what's some of the thinking behind it? When you get somebody saying, well, I want deep sound, but I don't want a 12, how do you tell them, no, you're wrong. You can get deep sound out of a 12. What's some of the thinking behind that?
Well, I think I would say it's generally true that, the bigger the sub, the lower in frequency it can play as a general rule. But, again, depending on the content, depending on what, style of music you're playing, depending on the size of your crowd, you may not need that. If you want to crush souls, get some 18s and get a lot of them, because even the guys that have a pair of 18s, they still expect that to do, a room of 500 people or more and absolutely light their hair on fire. And the reality is that it's just not going to happen. You need more. As a general rule of thumb, if you look at larger rigs and guys doing production for a living, as a general rule of thumb, because full range loudspeakers are so much more efficient than subwoofers, it's just a fact. Generally speaking, a good ratio to achieve good headroom, so you're not running out of gas on your tops before the subs or vice versa, is really a 2-to-1 ratio of subwoofers to tops, generally speaking. There's other factors involved, but just because the full range boxes are so much more efficient than low frequency devices and subwoofers are really hard to deal with. I mean, they're moving a lot of air. It takes a lot of energy. So generally speaking, you need more subs than you do tops.
No, absolutely. Okay, so then with that being said, let's talk about crossover, because when you buy, for example, the my ETX 15Ps, they have 3 different crossover points. Obviously, I can modify that as needed, but it seems that that's a standard. A lot of people do 80, 100, and 120, whether it's a 10, 12, or 15-inch model. I personally like crossing everything over at 100, but even in some cases, I've had a couple people tell me, well, try crossing your tops at 100 and the subs at 125. You're going to get a little bit of that overlap, but you're going to notice a sound difference. And in some cases, I really have. That being said, what do you recommend? Again, I know the answer is always it depends, but what's your favorite crossover point? Is it that 100, the 125, and do you have an overlap like what I just described?
For me, 100 is usually a starting point, assuming we've got an 18-inch subwoofer and either a 12 or 15-inch top. If you're doing anything smaller than a 12 for your full range box, I would tend to work the sub a little bit harder. But a good way to kind of think about that is it's really kind of to taste, number one. What do you like? If you want some overlap there, you can certainly do that. That would kind of enhance the low mids a little bit. Generally, I don't like to do that because I find that most engineers, that's the kind of the first frequency they're going to reach for and kind of suck a little bit out to kind of get some clarity in their system is kind of those low mids. That 1 to 200 hertz range is where things always seem to get a little muddy, is right around the crossover point there. So I don't like having a whole lot of overlap between the boxes that way. The other thing I would say is another good rule of thumb would be to try to, if you have a system where, say, you just have 12s over 18s, and you're finding that you're running out of headroom, say you're limiting on your tops before you're limiting your subs, what you may want to do then is actually set your crossover point higher, so that essentially then your tops have a smaller range of frequencies to reproduce and your sub is doing a little more work.
Mm-hmm.
Vice versa, if your sub is the one that's running out of gas first, which is often the case, because guys may be using just one top over one sub, and as I mentioned previously, tops are so much more efficient that they can get a lot louder comparatively when you're doing one and one, right? So what you would do then in that case is actually lower the crossover point, ask your full range speakers to do a little more work and your sub to do a little less work. But again, that's something they can play around with and just see. If you don't like the sound of it, then don't do it. There's really no wrong answer. The only other thing I'll mention is with EV, what we've done is taken not just those crossover points where you've got 80, 100, 120, 150, whatever it is, but we've also then actually given presets to work with specific full range models. So you can pair your ETX 18 sub with the corresponding ETX 12P loudspeaker, and vice versa. The top, you would select specifically which sub. So we're not just doing a crossover point, but we're also correcting for phase and some time alignment things in those crossover points, which can even further enhance that. So for those of you that do have EV speakers with those capabilities, I would always try to recall and use the factory presets for the specific models instead of the generic 100 hertz or so on and so forth. We put those in there if you're mix and matching brands, God forbid, or anything else. But you do have those options.
Awesome. You mentioned obviously time alignment, crossovers, the DSPs. A lot of different speaker manufacturers have like FIR written on there. I know the ETX talks about theirs. What is that? And what is something that when we're looking at speakers, they all, or manufacturers, they all have their different names for it. What is that to us? Why does it matter? And what do we need to be on the lookout for?
At the end of the day, what matters is, if done properly, it means your speakers will sound better at the end of the day. The reason for that is there's two types of basic algorithm. Well, I shouldn't say algorithms, but two basic types of processing. Old analog processing was IIR, which stands for infinite impulse response. Okay, what infinite impulse response means is basically, if you imagine a 30-band EQ, you've seen those old graphic EQs like a Clark Technic DN360, right? And I want to suck out, say, 1,000 hertz, right? And I take that out, right, because it's feeding back on me or whatever. With IIR, when you suck out a certain frequency, it impacts several frequencies around it. Okay, it's not a very fine slice. It's kind of a wide cube, right? So I suck out 1,000 hertz, and it's kind of wide. And that may not be something that you do every day, but this is something that companies that didn't, when our engineering team is tuning the box basically to give you something that you can plug in and go and it sounds great, there's years worth of tweaking before with processing. Previously when they would tweak, they would use IIR. And at that point, when you correct one problem, some other problem down the line pops up. Okay. So what FIR does is that's called finite impulse response. And what that means is when they want to make corrections to certain frequencies within the signal processing, it's now powerful enough to make very specific corrections to very specific frequencies. So the end result is a much flatter response, a much more neutral response, and a much more natural response. So you're not causing problems. I can correct something here, and it doesn't have an impact over here or here. So at the end of the day, there's FIR is really used with that, number one, with overall frequency response, and making sure that it's a nice, even response coming out of the loudspeaker. It's also then used to create very steep crossover slopes. With IIR crossovers, what you would often see is crossover slopes that would look something like this. There'd be a very slow overlap, and that crossover point, I'm not doing this very well here, but you know, the crossover points would look something like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where with and what you're getting there is now a lot of overlap, and you've got frequencies coming out and making impacts on the subs or the tops that aren't quite right. With FIR now, it's conceivable to make basically brick wall crossover slopes that are essentially, again, two right angles. It's hard for me to do this with my finger, but
Right.
the crossover slopes are basically straight up and down flat, so there's no overlap. You know, there's very little overlap between the two. So when those FIR filters are applied on a crossover, you know, previously at 100 hertz, with IIR, there would be some overlap. So both systems would end up playing some overlap. Now with FIR, it's very clean, and so it's literally 100 hertz and up, you're doing that, and 100 hertz and down, you're doing that, and those make then the loudspeakers much more efficient because there is no overlap. They are doing specifically the job that they are designed to do and nothing more. There's no artifacts being left in. And I'll just add one other thing that EV does is we call ours FIR drive, because ours is not just the processing side with the crossover slopes and the frequency response. Ours also adds in look ahead limiters and some protection to the box, peak limiting, and things like that. So it's all in one DSP package that we call FIR drive, which is kind of a couple steps beyond just typical FIR filters. So it difference is minimal but important.
Oh, absolutely. And real quick, the chat has been blowing up with questions, so we may be jumping back and forth in a couple minutes. Before we go into some of the FAQs, is there any more tips, anything else that, you know, DJs and some of these sound guys need to consider when they're setting up their rig?
You know, the first thing I would say is always bring more than you think you need. I see that as a trend, and you know, I think people are try to squeeze more than they should have out of their systems, and honestly, it comes back to bite them. And in some ways, it bugs me because it's as simple as having the right tool for the job. You know, you wouldn't use a $99 Black & Decker, you know, to build a Manhattan skyrise. So don't try to do that, you know, in your own
Wow, there
backyard.
goes that bit I put in.
Just bring the right tool, get the right tool, buy once, cry once. And you know, if that means you have to buy an expensive system once, do that. You know, don't buy a small system and realize you've outgrown it, and then have to buy another system and then outgrow that. You know, get something that's scalable, get something that you can modify and grow over time with what your needs are. And you know, realize that you know, there's a reason why I make at EV, why we have a $399 12-inch two-way powered loudspeaker, and I have one that's $1,500. You know, it's not just, you know, I'm not selling smoke and mirrors with the high one. You know, it's built to do jobs that, you know, the less expensive models can't do.
Of course. So before we go into some of the questions here, I know that you have an audio course with Ben Stowe, correct?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell people about that? Because I really think that's something a lot of these guys may not even be aware about that they would absolutely love. I think it's sold out for this year, right?
It's getting real close if it hasn't yet. It's called the Sound Symposium. We won't be doing it again until April of next year. But yeah, Ben is a great guy. He is obviously a he lives up here in Minnesota, so we see him all the time. It's practically a fixture in our building. Bless his heart. And there's there's nobody that's better for his customers. I mean, that guy works so hard, it's unbelievable. I hope all of you really do support him, and even if it ends up costing you $10 more, believe me, it is absolutely worth having that relationship with the crew at NLFX. But we do have it actually, the idea came because we were hosting, as strangely as it sounds, the lighting symposium. The lighting symposium has been held at our offices in Minneapolis for the last 4 or 5 years, and was really cool what they did, and we would just let them use the facility. And so we got the idea of, hey, why don't we start, instead of me whining that nobody knows anything about audio, why don't I put my money where my mouth is and start teaching it? So that's what we're trying to do. And so the one coming up in April, we actually piggybacked it. So it's a full 4-day event, but you have the option to take either or course. It's 2 days of lighting symposium, 2 days of audio symposium, and you can either take one or the other, or both, which obviously for those that would come in from out of town makes it that much more feasible. Instead of, if you were interested in both, you wouldn't have to travel twice. So lighting symposium sold out. I think there's only a handful of seats, maybe literally a handful, maybe 4 or 5 left. So it's 50 people that we pack into our academy, and you get to see EV's headquarters, and we go through the basics of audio 101, basically. And we start at the beginning. So nobody's left behind, and we have tests at the end of every day. We review those to make sure everybody's getting the concepts that we presented. It's very hands-on. And it starts with the most basic principles of audio. It's hey, what is a decibel? What is a watt? Things like this. It's literally defining those, and we make sure that's interactive. If anybody's like, whoa, you can look out and you can tell who's getting it, who's not. And if that glazed look in your eye comes over, we know, hey, we got to slow it down, or let's just stop everything and we'll talk you through it before we move on. And although Ben does a great job, but we do mix it up. It's not Ben the whole time. I present quite a bit. Some of our engineers present. Some of our sales team presents. So you get different flavors, different presentation styles, different strengths and weaknesses depending on the person. So it's not a single talking head just jawing at you for 2 days, and it really keeps you on your toes, and it's pretty cool. We did our first one last year, and it was very well received, and so we're going to do it again. We're excited.
That's awesome. So You ready for some questions, Mike?
Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. John already knows which one this is. I've had at least 30 people that have asked about, will EV make this and this product or this and this product? Some of them more at Infocom, so I don't want to say too much. What can you tell us that we should be expecting at DJ Expo, or if anything at all?
Well, I can tell you that we will be launching 2 new products at DJ Expo. One is a full family, one is a single product. And I'm not going to give any details away on the full family.
Of course.
But I do have I think this is the first time ever.
I think this is
Hear it first, and this Jockey News exclusive.
Yeah, you know what? And then I had the picture ready. And
just kidding.
Check back at DJ Expo.
Right. So I'll flash it up there real quick. It's something we've been working on real quick. I'm not gonna really talk much about it. You're gonna see this start hitting everywhere in mid to late August. It'll be out there, but we've been working on this guy for a while here.
There it is. Yep.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. I'm not going to talk too much more about it. I can tell you that it will blow away anything else.
Ooh.
Similar format.
That is exciting. So, guys, get your tickets to DJ Expo. So,
give him an echo when he goes crazy.
Yeah, no, holy crap! Like all these people, like yes. This has been, I think, the busiest chat we've had so far in the stream. So,
Great.
we'll give you guys a second, real quick, to change your underwear now that you have been blown away. Mike, tell us about the price that EV is giving out today, and then I'll get these questions.
We've invested really heavily at. Are we talking about the expo thing?
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's do both then. Yeah, let's talk about.
We're doing both.
Yeah, let's do both.
I forgot what I told you on the other thing. You'll have to tell me what I told you.
Oh, okay.
I forgot. We talked about it a while ago. I forgot, but because we'll be at Expo in a big way, we've got the biggest booth on the show floor this year. We're going to do it up big. We've got these 2 new product launches. I do have 6 full DJ Expo passes that we can give away. I don't know how we want to do that, but all I need is where to send them, and I'll just mail them to them.
Absolutely. What we'll do is, we have the names right now that we've been copying down. Everybody's been putting in their names. Now that I have everybody's names, we'll do the big price first, and I'm pulling that up right now, and then you can tell everybody a little bit about it. But basically, I have the pair of the ZLX 15Ps. I believe that's what you mentioned.
Oh, right on. Okay,
so,
yeah, I remember now.
Guys, trust me.
A pair of ZLX 15Ps, and it doesn't get much better than that. It's those things retail for $500 a piece, so it's $1,000 prize. Not bad at all. They are our entry level product, so don't go try to do a prom with them, please. But I can tell you that they are by far the best bang for the buck that you will find in the industry. ZLX, when it came out about 3 years ago now, rocketed to the -- selling box in the world, and it has remained there ever since. We sell more ZLX than anything, and although it's our entry point, you should know that for what you get out of that box, it sells that well because it's extreme value. We underprice that box, honestly, and it sells like crazy. It really does. So they sound fantastic. They get plenty loud. They won't kill you like ETX will, right? And it better not. But I can tell you, they're nice and light. They're fantastic looking. They're good box. Everybody probably already knows. Why am I even selling? They've seen ZLX. It's all over the place.
I remember the first time that I heard them. Ben was like a little schoolgirl. You gotta come see this, like.
I remember the video.
Yeah, and they sounded incredible not just for the price point. Even if you're comparing them to speakers, for example, at that point, I remember I had the Bose speakers. I'm like, no, these have a much punchier sound. And the amp is nowhere as powerful as the ETX, but like you said, for the price, there is, even to this day, there's still nothing in the market quite like those. I have 3 of my DJs that have them. They absolutely love them. I actually have one guy that got called into a last-minute grad party. It was a couple hundred students, and he didn't have his subs with him, but he said they kept up. They are really good for what they are. So let me pull up. So I guess we'll give those away first, and then we will have the Expo passes. Right. Let me make sure I don't have anybody here. Okay, hold on. I still got some people that are putting in their names.
We'll have to wrap up here in a couple minutes, Arnaldo.
Yes. So we're gonna real quick go. Okay, so I have all the names put in, and this is it U.S. or U.S. and Canada? What's the winner? What's the actual restrictions, Mike?
I can do U.S. and Canada.
Oh, okay.
Yay, right. Canadian friends.
All right. So if you're from the U.K., ship it to a Canada friend, and then just.
And they'll just keep it.
Yeah. So, congratulations, you made a brand new friend. Let's go ahead and get the names. So, guys, what I'm doing is I'm copying all the names that you've put in. We are going to go into random.org. I'm copying that name right now. And I'm going to hit randomizer. And the winner is, let's see, Dominic Moser. Dominic Moser. Woo! Your sound has been upgraded quite a bit. I don't know. You may already have ZLXs, but if not, right. Hey. And actually, funny enough, a lot of the comments were, I already have EVs, I want more. They're like Pringles, So that is awesome. And then let's go to, I guess we'll go over, how many passes did you say for Expo?
I got 6.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and punch in the name here. I have, let's see, we have Dominic Moser, we have winner, and then for the DJ Expo passes. And if you cannot accept the pass, please let me know, and we'll go down to the next person. I have Jordan Nelson, John Roca, Tim King. That's 3 out of 6, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Chase Jewell. That's 4 out of 6. David Vallejo. That's 5 out of 6. And Mark Woods. If for any reason you cannot go, please let us know. If you are the winner, guys, please do me a favor. Send me a message on Facebook. I'm posting my personal DJ Facebook right now. I will get you in touch with Mike. He will get you guys in touch. Mike, I know you guys have social media, so obviously Facebook, they need to go like EV.
Please.
John, I know you have to go real quick. We still haven't gone through some of the Q&A, so John, if you have to go, I totally understand. Yes.
Can I just mention real quick, outside of just the standard Electro-Voice Facebook, one thing I would encourage everybody to do is Alex Cohen, who's a big EV user, he reached out to us not long ago, and he started another Facebook group called EV Speaker Owners.
Okay.
Which is really cool because it's not run by the brand. It's just a bunch of EV users, but EV people that work at EV are members also. So it's kind of a more informal way and interactive kind of thing. If you have questions or issues, it's not quite as formal as the regular Facebook brand page. It's kind of an off the cuff. So I'd encourage anyone to look at that one too. It's pretty cool.
Awesome. I'll put the link up on the video. So, John, do you have like 3 minutes so we can do a quick fire round FAQ?
Yeah, if you want to do that quick.
I keep forgetting. I got so excited about the price. Okay, from Ian Moore, question: cardioid mode. Can you do it with 2 subs or do you need 3?
You can do it with 2. You need multiples. Two works fine.
Marvin says he was told to get a separate DSP to achieve better sound out of his ETX system. Any comments on that, or?
I would say no, unless it's going to solve a problem that you have that you can't do in the box. I guess I'd have to ask the question: what are you unhappy with what you have, and why? What do you think you need to correct?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to hear that anybody would say that, because like I said, I don't even touch my drive rack anymore because of that DSP. It has everything I need, including a much easier to use delay. I felt like with the DBX, I have to keep doing math, and I don't want to do that. Whereas with the ETX, it pretty much let me even calculate it by feet.
Right.
So Chris Davis asks, he says, first, he loves the EV brand, but do sound compressors affect the sound quality? For example, using a DBX drive rack. So if you use the compressor on that, is that going to hurt when you're using it alongside the DSP on the EVs?
Well, a compressor can be used usefully and well if used sparingly, let's say. Compression is used to help even out the overall dynamics, right? If you have someone that's talking very quietly into a microphone, a compressor can help bring that to a nominal level, and help correct that. Now, chances are that with most DJs, you're applying that crossover then to your playback content, which can be very dangerous, because now you've taken musical content that, is dynamic and is supposed to have peaks and valleys, right? Yep. Well, all those valleys that we see in musical content as it goes up and down, those are in essence the rest period for your loudspeakers. That's when your loudspeakers get a chance to recover and go, okay, right? Before I have to go bang again, I get a chance to, whew. Now, if I take that and I compress it all and it's constantly just ripping as loud as it can, you're just asking for trouble, overheating, and there's really no reason to do it. I find it's a terrible tool. I hate the way most music is produced these days.
Oh yeah,
very much compressed. And the reason they do that is to make it loud, and it jumps out on the radio at you. It's really loud, so it gets your attention a little bit. But that's really, part of what makes music great is the dynamics, right? There's supposed to be quiet emotional parts. They're supposed to be loud in your face parts. That's part of the experience of listening to music. So it can be a useful tool, but I would say maybe for speech only, very sparingly. But as a general rule, I wouldn't use compression at all.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, I think John did a show on how much overcompressed music or how much overcompressed music today
Yeah.
really is.
Terrible.
Real quick, next question here. Again, on cardioid mode, does it push the bass further to the back of the room? This is coming from Marvin. Does cardioid mode push the bass further back of the room?
No. All cardioid is going to do is allow you basically the same luxuries that you have with your full range speakers. With your full range speakers, because they're easier to control those frequencies, you get a nice 90 by 60 degree pattern, or 90 by 50, 100 by 100, whatever it is. So you can point the loud part where you want it. And that not only keeps the loud part going in a certain area, but it also keeps the loud part from going in areas where you don't want it. So that can be a useful tool if there's areas where I use the example of outdoor events. If you've got a pretty big rig and you're doing an outdoor event, and it's later at night and you've got your subs going, well, again, because they're generally omnidirectional, if there's residential area behind you but your party's this way, maybe it's the house that's 100 feet 200 feet behind you that's calling the cops on you. Well, that's a perfect application to use cardioid subs and point the loud part where you want it and keep that noise from going the opposite direction. So it won't go any further, but it will keep it from going in places you don't want it to go.
Absolutely. Real quick before we get to, because there's a lot of EV questions, John, I know you got to get going. What's your show about? And I will make sure people come over to your channel as soon as they're done here.
We are going to be talking about some of the greatest bands out there, some of our favorites. Brian and I went through and we picked out a few bands that basically have a long shelf life, what have you, and we're going to be talking about that tonight.
Awesome. All right, guys. John, I will send people over to your channel. Thank you very much, sir, for tuning in and helping out as always.
You bet. We'll catch you later.
Thank
Mike,
you.
I'll see you at DJ Expo.
Can't wait, buddy. Good to see you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, Mike, let's go with a couple more questions. Actually, there's quite a bit that came in, but some of these are the same ones that you've already answered. Let's see here. You've already answered that one. Marvin wants to know, I mean, it's not technically an EV question, but are there any updates on Dynacord? Are we going to see Dynacord pushing stuff into U.S. again? Anything that that you can say regarding that? Yeah,
I can actually, and there's big news there on that front. Just recently, in fact, at Infocom, we've changed a little bit with Dynacord. So previously, both EV and Dynacord, we've been sister companies for a long time. We're both owned by Bosch. But both would have their separate engineering departments. And so Dynacord historically made a lot of electronics for EV. They would make the stuff, our amp modules and signal processing, things like this. And Electro-Voice, our core competency is in microphones and loudspeaker design. So Dynacord loudspeakers would have, EV woofers and high frequency drivers, and then they would tune it their own certain way and have kind of a different sound with Dynacord than EV does. But that's actually changed now. So just at Infocom, we launched Dynacord again in the US as its own brand. And we've defined these brands now where Dynacord is going to be exclusively globally available, and Dynacord is going to exclusively make DSP and electronics.
Wow.
Okay. And Electro-Voice will exclusively make loudspeakers and microphones.
Okay.
So after a certain amount of time, there's going to be some phase in period, but there will no longer be EV amplifiers, for instance, and there will no longer be Dynacord speakers. What we may see is some of those things rebranded. We're still working through which things we would bring over, but you may see, for instance, people may be familiar with the Dynacord Cobra rig, which is just insane. We may end up doing rebranding that thing EV, or we may end up rebranding some EV electronics as Dynacord and so on and so forth. But they're going to be very well defined in what they do, and so that's where we're heading with those brands.
Awesome. Hey, John.
I can't
He's back.
start the next show until this one's completed because it's on my account.
Okay. Tell you what, Mike, I'm gonna send you a different link real quick. That way we can not steal John's show. Okay. So guys, hang on 1 second. We'll be right back in about 30 seconds. I'm still gonna be here. Let me leave this meeting. I'll send you a new link via Facebook right now, Mike.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Anyway.
All right. Let's see. All right, guys, hang on 1 second. All right, guys. Sorry about that. I am real quick just going to send this link so I can invite Mike in. If you guys are watching and you did win one of the Expo passes, please let me know as soon as possible via Facebook, and we'll get you guys set up right away with those passes. All right. And again, that's a big thanks to EV for hooking us up with that, because the passes were like a last minute surprise. But hold on. We still have some more answers coming up in just a moment. Obviously, if you guys have any more questions or whatnot, unfortunately, I don't know if we can take any more in, but we can certainly try. So real quick, let's just go over the names. Oh, there he is. Hey, Mike.
I'm back.
All right. So, okay. So let's go back to the questions here. So John Lejeune asks, actually, no, sorry. Let's go back one up. DJ Tweezy wants to know, how long is the manufacturer's warranty, like on the ETX and EKX series?
We've got a 3-year warranty on the entire enclosure.
Awesome. And then, okay, so John Lejeune actually asked, what happens if you have to replace something, first of all, if it's in warranty, how long, like, I have a gig, something happened to my driver, I need it for, my next gig. How fast is the turnaround time? Is there some sort of advanced replacement program? And if it's out of warranty, how much on average, like, how much more are the parts? He said that he had another brand and the driver was only $100 less than the entire sub.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what sub price point you're talking about. As far as how the warranty claims are handled with EV, we've got 2 different options if should you have an issue. Number one, you could deal with it with one of our authorized service centers around the country. So hopefully a local pro audio shop in your backyard is usually the easiest and best way to do it if you're not in a hurry to get something turned around super duper fast. There's different lead times depending on, number one, what's wrong with the speaker and do they have the part in stock, and number two, just how backed up those individual service centers are. Mm-hmm. If you are in a hurry, though, we do. You can contact our own Lincoln, Nebraska repair center. So that's where EV's service, factory service is done, and so it's nice in the middle of the country. But there's not a lot of people that live in Lincoln, so pretty much everybody's going to have to ship something to us. If it's under warranty, shipping is covered, and we do offer free advance replacements. We ask you not to abuse it because we try to turn it around pretty fast anyway. But if you really are in need of an advanced replacement to get you through a gig, again, it depends on what their turnaround time is, but they're usually pretty flexible and really good at working with people. They're good folks. And in fact, again, if I can plug that EV speaker owners page, Ryan Nelson, who's the head of our service team and the head of all of our authorized service centers here in North America, he's on there all the time, helping people out. So if you ever have questions there, you can jump on there real easy.
Awesome. Real quick, Dominic, make sure you guys send me a message, and then I'll get everybody in touch with you, Mike, so you can hook them up with the pass, and Dominic with the speakers. Mike Anderson asked, are there any suggestions for a speaker that can be mostly hidden? Is there a combination that would allow for the smallest possible tops combined with a sub so it still looks great for weddings?
Yes, I mean, I think we've achieved that with the new speaker we have coming out. And I can't again talk too much about it, but there is a blend of aesthetics versus performance that I think we've achieved that no one else has. It really kind of depends on what you would consider to be full range audio. I think this system that we're coming out with is more than adequate for most wedding events
Mm-hmm.
and even other events of that size. If you're looking for something more than that, I would say it's more about placing the speaker somewhere a little less conspicuous and it's all the trade-off of physics. If you have if you're trying to get a lot of output, that generally speaking, that's the speakers are going to get bigger from that point on.
Oh, absolutely. And then DJ Tweezy, I'm guessing he's a car audio guy. He asked, what about subwoofer break-in?
There's really not so much of the thing, at least the way we build our subs. You know, uh, there is some theory that over time the paper or the woofers, loosened up a little bit. I mean, there may be something to that, but honestly, that wouldn't make the speaker any better.
Mm-hmm.
A good stiff cone is actually going to be more efficient because the current that's being delivered to it isn't being lost with the speaker flopping around. So all of our testing is done with brand new components, and just like anything else, they degrade over time. So I would start with I wouldn't expect things to get better. It would be I guess my thoughts on that.
Absolutely. So, hang on one second here. I'm like going through a million questions. Victor actually asked a pretty good one because I'm in Florida, so I can filter this. Any suggestions on working in an environment that has a lot of moisture and humidity?
Mm. You know, not so much. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, I would try to store them in a fairly cool, dry place, um, if possible. If you're storing them in a garage or something like that, investing in a dehumidifier wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Um, unless it's really really wet. I don't think you'd have too many problems, but even down in Florida where you are, Arnaldo,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything particularly corrosive or anything you should have to worry about. Yes, over time things can rust faster, things like that. But again, I guess the best thing I would say is try to keep it in a dry place when you're not using it. But for the amount of time that they're actually in use, those say 7 to 8 hours, a week or whatever it is. Maybe you're using it more than that, but even if it was 7 or 8 hours a day, if they're being stored properly at night, you shouldn't have too many issues. You can run into some problems on the coastlines where there's a lot of salt water in the air. At that point, it's even more corrosive. But generally speaking, just taking care of them, storing them in a good place is the best way to do it. One thing I like to do actually with my tools, I do it in the garage
Mm-hmm.
with just my tools here in Minnesota, which isn't too bad. Humid. I'll save those silica dry packets that
Yeah.
that ship in the boxes, and I'll throw those in the drawers. So that's a good way to do it. So whether or not you store those in like your speaker pockets or things like that, it's got to be pretty much an enclosed area for that to work. But other than that, there's not much you can do.
No, I mean, and I'm in Florida, and I'll say this from the customer's perspective. I use my ATXs outside quite a bit, guys. If it can stand Florida heat and humidity, you'll be fine. Florida's brutal. Jeff Caslon asks, or he says, Mike, I was told by old school audio guys to roll out the 1K and frequencies around it for better sound quality, that it flattens out the vocals. Is this true or BS? And it was right around the time that you were explaining that.
Yeah, it can be true, but that's generally going to be, it's just generally going to be a matter of taste.
Yeah.
At point, if you think it's real honky, in a way you can really tell is right around that 1 to 4K range, is actually a pretty annoying frequency to humans, which, coincidentally, it's we're engineered that way. Our ears are more sensitive to those frequencies than some others. So even though you're getting a flat response, 1 to 4K might be more annoying to us, and it's really kind of interesting. There's theories that the reason for that is with human evolution, really, because we are sensitive. That's right where a baby's cry resides. So we are particularly sensitive to where a baby's cry resides. It really bugs us when we hear that, so we want to go fix the problem. So,
exactly.
how's that for Cliff Clavin on you?
Right. Okay, one day we'll do an EV show without somebody asking this, but I can't blame him for asking. I don't know if you can answer this one though. Rick Shunk wants to know if there's any update on the Dual 18. I know that you'd mentioned that, it was something that you guys are basically trying to perfect, because it's not always easy to do. Any luck on that?
Not yet. Nothing I can talk about yet. I can tell you we're still working on it, but we don't have anything I can really share today.
Okay. Well, at least, guys, don't lose hope. I guess the biggest thing is, and this is from an outsider's perspective, is just trying to find a way to make it work just within one circuit, right, Mike? It's not just as easy as slapping two subs together, because in that case, you just get two subs and you have the redundancy.
Right. There's a lot of challenges with it. It's weight, it's logistics,
Mm-hmm.
it's there's a lot of nuance to it. It's not as easy as you think. The ETX 18 single 18 by itself is what, 110 pounds or something like that. I mean, it's heavy. It's worth it, but it's heavy. Now double that. I mean, there's very few carriers that make a lot of sense for us to ship a 200-pound sub around. Once you double that, and the reason is because of the way it's built. So I would just first ask the question, why do you want a double 18? If the reason is because it's more, the truth is all things being equal, doubling from a single 18 to a double 18 is only going to gain you 3 dB, 3 decibel. That's the smallest amount of volume change that a human can really even perceive. So is that really worth carrying around another 200 pounds? Maybe, maybe not. Kind of depends on what you're doing. But
See, for me, and I thought the same way. And then, again, the thing I love about the ETX is how easy they are to roll. First of all, the best casters in the industry, just hands down. So thank you for putting good wheels on them. And they don't vibrate either, which is great. But I get just as good of a sound out of them whether I'm coupling them or stacking them. As a matter of fact, if I'm corner loading them, I get much better sound stacking one on top of the other than doing side by side. So yeah, I was one of the dual 18. I'm like, no, I think even if it's, even if you find a way to do a dual 18 that's slightly less, I like having that redundancy personally. But and then two last questions here. John Molinesto says, he goes, his tops are being overpowered by by his bottoms, and he's using the ETXs for the 18s. So should he cross them both over at 80? He's currently crossing over 100. So if the sub's overpowering the top, should he just go ahead and bring it down to 80?
The first thing I would do is try crossing using the factory preset. So assuming he's got the 12s, I would set the crossover point on the sub to match the 12, and vice versa. Change the crossover point on the 12 to match the 18.
Mm-hmm.
That should be as ideal as you can get. And you may still find that your subs are overpowering your tops or vice versa. That's kind of a good problem to have at that point. I would just, if you find that that's the case after you've changed that crossover, I would just turn down your sub a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully John, I know, he's still there. So, and then last one here, Loud and Clear Texas asks, if it's ever in the plans for EV to make a box or, a top that has basically a built-in mixer, something with like a 3-channel mixer, 2 stereo input, something that they can use for weddings and receptions without needing an additional audio mix console.
I wouldn't say that we'll build in a full-on console or anything with a ton of channels. I think what you will find is even on our existing loudspeakers, they often have at least 2, usually 3 inputs on them. And from there, because each input has an individual input control as well as a master output, you essentially do have a mixer built on board. Now, of course, you don't have all the EQ settings on each individual channel and things like that, but it's kind of a different product at that point. It's an interesting concept. I think where you may see that go in the future at some point is being able to make those changes through Bluetooth remote control or Wi-Fi, control on say a mobile device of some kind.
One day.
And then the back of the box is just a bunch of dumb inputs, basically. So something like that I think might be feasible. But you got to be careful too, because it's a matter of applications. If we build in, tons and tons of inputs on the back of a box, there's only so much room. Cost goes up. How often are you really using that? And what's the trade-off to just buying a mixer at that point?
Oh, absolutely. And then, okay, actually, one just came in, just a quick one. Lindley Barton is from Australia. He wants to know, where he can find his nearest EV dealer in Australia.
That's a good question. I'm just a dumb North American marketing guy, so I don't have a whole lot of information for him, unfortunately. But I tell you what, if you reach out to me through Facebook or let's see, what's another good way for me to do that? I don't know. Leave something in the comment section. Is there a comment section?
Yeah, or actually, Lindley,
Arnaldo, can you?
Yeah, I just posted on my Facebook. I've been posting my Facebook in the chat section. Lindley, shoot me a message on Facebook. I'll get you in touch with Mike, and then you can definitely find a dealer that way.
Or even right on the EV Facebook page.
Yeah.
We're very responsive. Our social media team's very responsive, so they can do that research and hook you up there too. So thanks for asking that.
Absolutely. So basically, Facebook, you guys need to go find EV. Is it under EV Electro-Voice?
Electro-Voice.
Electro-Voice.
I think one word. Yep.
And then same thing with Instagram. If I'm not, it's under Electro-Voice Official. So you guys make sure to follow them on Instagram and show them some love. That being said, this concludes tonight's show. I will be sending everybody an email on the next show, which should be coming on, what's today? Thursday. So Thursday's the next show for this week. Mike, thank you so much for your help and your generosity. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Oh, I'm neither, but I got you all fooled, don't I? Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Arnaldo. Let's do it again, man.
Absolutely. All right, guys, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. We'll do our best to get them streamed over to you. My name is Arnaldo Hoffman of Gear It First. I'm here with Mike Doucot from Electro-Voice. You guys have a great evening, and God bless.